I want you to stop whatever you're doing right now, because what I'm about to tell you is the kind of story that makes you sit back, shake your head, and whisper, she knew the whole time. He handed her divorce papers while she was still in a hospital gown, still healing, still holding their newborn son. And by the next morning, his lawyer was sweating through his shirt, and Garrett Holloway had no idea why. If you've ever believed that karma doesn't just arrive, it arrives prepared, then stay with me until the very end of this video. And if this story moves you the way I think it will, hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe, because we tell the stories nobody else dares to touch. Now, let me take you back to where this all began. Naomi Carter was not the kind of woman who walked into a room demanding attention. She didn't need to. She was the kind of person who sat quietly in the corner of a meeting, said maybe 4 sentences, and somehow left with everyone in the room thinking about her long after she was gone. She had built her career as a forensic accountant in the insurance industry, which, if you don't know what that means, essentially means she was professionally trained to find things that people tried very hard to hide. Numbers don't lie to Naomi. People do, but numbers, never. She was warm. She was grounded. She had this laugh that started slow and then just took over her whole face. Her friends adored her. Her colleagues respected her. And when she fell in love, she fell the way she did everything else. Completely, carefully, and with her whole heart. His name was Garrett Holloway. Old money. Third-generation real estate family based out of a mid-sized southern city that had just enough prestige to make certain families feel like royalty. Garrett was tall, polished, knew exactly what to say at dinner parties. On the surface, he was the kind of man who seemed like a genuine catch. Underneath, he was a man who had spent his entire life being told that he was exceptional, without ever really being tested. They met at a charity gala for a children's hospital foundation. Naomi had been invited through her firm. Garrett had been invited because his family's name was on the donor wall. He saw her from across the room. Family insisted on it, which nobody found surprising. Old money families always protect old money. Naomi's friends were nervous when they heard about it. They pulled her aside, asked if she'd had her own lawyer look at it, asked if she really understood what she was signing. Naomi smiled and said, "I didn't just have my lawyer look at it. I wrote half of it." Nobody quite understood what she meant by that at the time. They would. From the outside, the first 2 years of the marriage looked like a success story. They bought a beautiful home. They traveled. They showed up to family events and charity functions and looked like exactly the kind of couple that other couples quietly envied. But there were cracks. Small ones, at first. The kind you notice only if you're paying attention. Garrett's mother, Eleanor Holloway, was a woman who had mastered the art of cruelty through politeness. She never said anything overtly hateful. She was far too refined for that. But she had a talent for comments that landed just wrong enough to sting. She once asked Naomi at a family Easter dinner whether she planned to do something different with her natural hair for the upcoming family portrait. She once suggested, gently, that perhaps Naomi's career was a lot for a marriage to carry. Little needles, consistent, deliberate. Naomi absorbed them, not because she was weak, but because she had made a decision that her peace was worth more than winning arguments at Sunday dinners. She focused on her work. She focused on her husband. And when she found out she was pregnant at the start of year 3, she focused on that beautiful, overwhelming fact with everything she had. But the 3rd trimester brought something with it that Naomi hadn't planned for. Garrett changed. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in the slow, erosive way that you feel before you can name it. Business trips got longer. Dinners got quieter. He stopped reaching for his hand. He stopped asking about her day. He was present in the house, but absent in every way that actually mattered. Naomi noticed. The kind of exhausted, tearful joy that makes you believe in something bigger than yourself. Naomi's mother was there, her best friend was there, and Garrett was there, standing near the window, hands in his pockets, looking at his phone more than once during the final hour. He held the baby for approximately 3 minutes. Naomi watched him hold their son and saw something in his face that she couldn't name. Not love, not wonder, not the soft collapse that new fathers are supposed to feel. He handed the baby back, said he needed to make a call, and stepped out. 3 hours later, he came back into the room. Naomi was sitting up in the hospital bed, still in her gown, her son asleep in the bassinet beside her. Garrett walked in, and he was carrying a manila envelope. He set it on her tray table, the same tray table that still had her half-eaten cup of hospital jello on it. And he looked at her and said, "I think it's better we end this now. My lawyers have already filed." The room went completely still. Naomi looked at the envelope. She looked at her son. She looked back at Garrett. And she did not cry. She did not raise her voice. She did not throw the jello at him, which honestly he deserved. She simply looked at him with those steady, quiet eyes and said, "Did you read the prenup, Garrett? The whole thing?" He let out a short, dismissive. The next morning, Garrett Holloway was sitting in his office. He was relaxed. He was already moving on, texting, making plans, acting like a man who believed the hardest part was already behind him. His phone rang. He looked at the screen. The name read Devin Cross, Naomi's lawyer. He answered, probably out of arrogance more than curiosity. And Devin Cross, in the calm and measured tone of a man who had been waiting patiently for exactly this moment, began to explain what the prenuptial agreement actually said. The first 4 pages of the document were standard, boilerplate almost, exactly the kind of language that a busy legal team, skimming on behalf of a client who trusted them to handle it, would read, nod at, and move past. Garrett's lawyers had done exactly that. They had reviewed the first pages, confirmed the standard protective clauses for the Holloway family assets, and signed off. What they had not done, what apparently no one on Garrett's side had done, was read Appendix C. Appendix C had been drafted by Naomi, reviewed and refined by Devin, and signed, without full comprehension, by Garrett Holloway on the same afternoon he'd signed the rest of the document, because he had a dinner reservation at 7 and didn't want to be late. Appendix C stated, in precise and legally airtight language, that in the event the marriage was dissolved within the first 5 years and a biological child was present, and the dissolution was initiated by the husband without documented legal cause, the terms of asset division would invert completely. Naomi was entitled to 40% of all real estate holdings acquired during the marriage, full ownership of the primary residence, a child financial provision that reflected the lifestyle of the Holloway. Garrett panicked, and panicking men with resources and wounded pride are capable of extraordinary cruelty. He reached out through back channels to a local tabloid journalist he'd done favors for over the years. Within 48 hours, a story appeared online with a headline that made Naomi's friends' phones blow up with furious messages. The story implied, without quite saying it directly, that there had been questions about the baby's paternity, that Naomi had been less than faithful during the marriage, that Garrett was simply a wronged man trying to protect himself. It was vicious. It was calculated. And it was the move of someone who had run out of legitimate options and decided to burn everything instead. Naomi's legal team immediately requested a voluntary paternity test. Naomi agreed without hesitation, without drama, without a single public statement. The results came back within the week. Garrett was the biological father. 100%. Definitively. But here is what Garrett had not calculated. And this is where his own trap closed around him. The tabloid story had drawn significant public attention to the case.
And in that attention, a financial investigative journalist named Calloway, who wrote for a regional business publication and had been quietly suspicious of certain Holloway real estate dealings for over a year, saw an opening. Because Naomi was a forensic accountant, and forensic accountants, even when they are recovering from childbirth and fighting a divorce, notice things. During the marriage, Naomi had seen transactions that made her professional instincts flicker. She had documented them, methodically, quietly, the way she did everything. What Calloway uncovered, using Naomi's quiet documentation as a roadmap he didn't even know he'd been handed, was a shell company that Garrett had been using to move marital funds off the books. The company was registered under a name that meant nothing on its surface, but listed as a director of that company was a woman whose name would later emerge as Garrett's mistress, a relationship that had apparently been ongoing for nearly 2 years. The expose ran 3 weeks before the divorce was finalized. It detailed the hidden assets, the shell company, the deliberate financial deception. Garrett's real estate partners, men who had spent years protecting their own reputations carefully, began quietly making phone calls to their own.
And then came the letter. 3 weeks before the final divorce hearing, Naomi received an envelope in the mail. Handwritten address, no return label. She opened it at her kitchen table, her son asleep in the next room, and she read it twice before she called Devin. It was from Eleanor Holloway. Eleanor wrote that she had known about the mistress for over a year. She had known about Garrett's plan to file for divorce after the baby was born, a calculation made specifically to avoid the public sympathy that would have come from leaving a pregnant wife. Eleanor confessed that she had even, in a moment she said she was deeply ashamed of, suggested to Garrett that he wait until after the birth, not out of compassion for Naomi, but for optics. But Eleanor also wrote something else. She said that when she came to the hospital, not on the day of the birth, but 2 days later, when she finally made herself go, she had stood in the doorway of Naomi's room. Naomi hadn't seen her. She was sitting in the chair by the window, her son against her chest, his tiny face turned toward hers, and she was singing to him, softly, something Eleanor didn't recognize. And Eleanor, a woman who had spent decades being cold in the name of family loyalty, said she stood in that hallway and felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt ashamed, not embarrassed, not strategic, genuinely, deeply ashamed of the person her son was and of the role she had played in shaping him. The letter included something else entirely, a personal log Eleanor had been keeping. Dates, conversations, a notation about a voice recording on her personal phone, a call in which Garrett had explicitly discussed moving assets and timing the divorce filing for maximum legal advantage. Eleanor stated she was prepared to make this available to the court. Garrett found out about the letter 3 days later. He called his mother, furious, his voice breaking in a way it apparently hadn't since childhood. Eleanor Holloway listened to him, and then she said very quietly, "I'm done protecting you from yourself, Garrett," and she hung up the phone. The divorce was finalized on a Thursday morning in late spring. The hearing was brief, because by that point there was very little left to argue. The evidence was overwhelming. The prenup was airtight. The shell company had been documented. Warm lines. She didn't give a statement. She didn't pose for anything. She put on her sunglasses, walked to her car, and drove home. The settlement gave her the primary residence, 40% of the marital real estate portfolio, full child support calculated against the Holloway family's documented net worth, and every single dollar of attorney fees. Garrett faced a separate civil proceeding for the financial misconduct uncovered during the discovery process. His legal costs alone were staggering. 3 of his long-standing real estate partnerships were formally dissolved within the following 6 months. The Holloway family, which had once occupied a particular untouchable position in that city's social architecture, spent the better part of the following year in damage control.
And the tabloid story, the one Garrett had planted, the one designed to humiliate Naomi and cast doubt on her character, had been the very thing that triggered the financial investigation that dismantled him. He had pulled the thread himself. He just hadn't known what was attached to it. Naomi, by every account from the people who know her, did not spend much time looking back. She went back to work 4 months after the divorce. She redecorated the house. She let her son's things take over the living room in the beautiful, chaotic way that babies do. She had dinner with her mother every Sunday. She laughs that slow laugh that takes over her whole face. She never said a single public word about Garrett. Not one. She didn't need to. And here is the thing about Naomi Carter that I keep coming back to. The thing that I think about when I think about what this story actually means. She didn't build that prenup clause out of vengeance. She wasn't plotting against Garrett when she married him. She had simply spent enough of her life being underestimated, being overlooked, being the person in the room that certain people decided didn't need to be taken seriously. And she had made a quiet decision that she was going to protect herself. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. She knew that the people who dismiss you are rarely paying close enough attention to see what you've prepared. And she was right. She never yelled.